And we talked about John chapter 20. We talked about the first part of it, which we read on the feast night, regarding Mary Magdalene and Peter and John. And then last time we talked about the appearance to the disciples while the doors were closed, which is the second part of chapter 20. And also the appearance to Thomas, which we also celebrate on Thomas Sunday. Today we will continue John 21, and John 21 is it's a very interesting story that happened during the 40 days between Jesus' resurrection and his ascension. So let's read it together. It says, "After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias." So you will notice that in this part, every word has a meaning. And like I said, it's very interesting. It has so many deep meanings. First, he says, after these things. After these things, the last things that he talked about in the previous chapter was that Jesus appeared to Thomas. And of course, with the rest of the disciples, like a week after the resurrection or on the 8th day. And then he says, Jesus showed himself again. Jesus showed himself again. If you remember when we talked the disciples of Emmaus and the story when they were going back to their place and then Jesus appeared to them, it says that they could not recognize him. Their eyes were not open to recognize that he was Jesus. Which tells us that Jesus only shows himself as he wishes, when he wishes, and to whom he wishes to see him. So Jesus showed himself again, meaning that he's the one that has the control to show himself or not. When he wanted, he opened their eyes, like the two disciples of Emmaus when he broke the bread. When he wanted to show himself to Mary Magdalene, he told her Mary, so she recognized him. And you can see here that everyone recognized him in a different way. Mary Magdalene recognized him by his voice and the way he used to call her, Mary. But the two disciples of Emmaus recognized him when he broke the bread. The disciples recognized him when they saw him, and he said, "Peace be to you." And then we'll see also here in this story that they recognized him in a different way. To the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias. So he showed himself again to the disciples, and the place here is different from the previous places. In fact, most of the appearances that we read about in the other Gospels and in the Gospel of St. John, the chapter 20, the one that we read before, were in Jerusalem, in the upper room, when he appeared to them, or by the tomb when he appeared to Mary Magdalene, but all of them were in Jerusalem. But if you remember, when Jesus rose on Sunday, the first thing he told Mary Magdalene is what? Go tell my brothers that to go to Galilee, and there I will see them. And we said that to go to Galilee, Galilee is the place or is the home to many of the disciples, and is the place where Jesus spent a long time with the disciples. So go back to Galilee means go to the first experience. And the first experience could be different from one person to the other. Yani, for example, my first experience with God, the thing that makes me feel home, could be some kind of service at church, for example. Could be like a spiritual song, could be a hymn, could be a passage of the Bible that I like, know very well, and it reminds me of something. Could be sitting with God in a quiet time. Could be many different things. But when things start to decline, it's very good to remember to go back to Galilee. And like one of the saints said, everyone has his own Galilee. To the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias. So the Sea of Tiberias actually has like different names in the Gospels. One of them is the Sea of Tiberias, the other is the Sea of Galilee, and the third one is the Lake of Gennesaret. So all these are the same, the Lake of Gennesaret, the Sea of Tiberias, and the Sea of Galilee. And this is a pretty big lake, and we know a lot of stories that took place in this lake, like when the disciples were fishing and Jesus called them, when there was a storm and Jesus calmed the storm, when they saw Jesus walking on the water next to them during another storm, and also this story that we are about to read happened in the same place in the Sea of Tiberias. Remember that many of the disciples were fishermen, and this to them was home, and not only home, but also like something that reminds them of the old days. And then after these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias. He said, and in this way he showed himself. So like we said, Jesus shows himself whenever he wants, however he wants, and to the people that he chooses. Then this is the way. So he said, Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. So notice here, he mentioned the names of some of them, and except like two. So how many were there? Simon Peter, that's one. Thomas is the second. Nathanael of Cana of Galilee, he's the third. Then the sons of Zebedee are two, John and James, so that's five. And then two other of his disciples were together. So we have seven of the disciples. And those seven were together. And what brought them together is that, in obedience to the command of God, they went back to Galilee. And they were also like enjoying being together. One of the things also is that Thomas, when he was not with the disciples, he missed seeing Jesus on the first Sunday. So now he is, making sure that he is with them. But this time, it wasn't something that they are like proud of. It's actually something that they were kind of embarrassed about. And we'll see how and why. So in fact, because they were embarrassed of it, John is calling himself, with James, of course, the sons of Zebedee. If you remember, most of the times in the Gospel of St. John, when he refers to himself, he says what? The disciple that Jesus loved. Actually, we are going to read it now in a few minutes, like in verse 7, the disciple whom Jesus loved. But in this case, because he felt that they all made a mistake, then he said the sons of Zebedee. Here he actually said his name in a way. And we all know that the sons of Zebedee are John and James. So the leader here was Simon Peter. And he said to them, although some of them were actually not fishermen, like Thomas, for example, but all of them had something maybe to be like embarrassed of. And for example, Simon Peter just denied God like a few weeks back. I mean, we don't know exactly when this happened, but it's within the 40 days. Thomas doubted, although he said Thomas had many good reasons to want to see Christ. Nathanael is also one of the disciples that John mentioned in his the first chapter of his gospel. And Nathanael was the one that when they told him, we have found the Messiah, he said, I don't believe that from Nazareth would come out anything good. And then the sons of Zebedee, they also, had a couple of things with, a couple of encounters where they, for example, they asked from Jesus to be sitting on his right hand and left hand. And then he mentioned two other disciples, but without mentioning their names. But the key word here is, why did they actually go fishing? It says Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. And this is actually one of the things that happens to us many, many times. There are different explanations to this part. Some people say that they lost hope and they just went back to their original job. Some people said they were just bored. Some people said they were trying to make a living. They don't have any money and they are sitting waiting and they need money. But regardless of what it is, it refers to something that we all do, is to go back to what I want. And there is nothing wrong with fishing. There is nothing wrong with making money or with working, of course. And if this is actually something that they're going to make money from, that's totally fine. And St. Paul, for example, he was actually working and making tents. But he was making tents to provide for himself and for the people who served with him. But the thing is about St. Paul is that he was, this is not his goal. His goal was not to make tents and make money out of it. But his goal was to serve God, like 100%. And he used that as a tool to help him serve God. I feel that this story sometimes refers to us when we kind of give up, or say, I just want to relax. I just want to do what I want to do. I don't want to be, following a rule all the time or following the word of God all the time. I just want to take it easy and relax. So I feel this is more what it means by I'm going fishing. And they all followed him. They said to him, we are going with you also. I mean, of course, Peter was always like a leader, and many times a lot of people followed him in many different ways. And here, this time, they also followed him. I have a question here from Mina. That was after they rejoiced with Christ first appeared to them. Yes, of course. This story is sometime after, like after Thomas Sunday, like sometime after 8 days of the resurrection. We don't know exactly when, but it's definitely not before 8 days, because the beginning of the chapter says after these things. And of course, it's not past 40 days, which is the ascension. So it's somewhere between 8 and 40 days after the resurrection, but we don't know exactly when. And they still gave up, yes. Yes, because until then, we should not actually be condemning them, because we do the same thing. We actually see a lot more, but I know you're not, but I'm saying it's not actually hard to believe that they did that, because notice when he appeared to them on the first Sunday, when they first heard the women and their account, they did not believe, and then Jesus himself appeared to them and they believed. And at first they were afraid, but then they rejoiced when he said, like when he gave them peace and breathed into their faces. But then after that, when we read the account of Thomas Sunday, when he appeared to them with Thomas, he actually again said, peace to you. So it looks like they were still kind of, a little bit afraid as well, because nothing changed. So the resurrection took time to sink in. And of course, the ultimate was when the Holy Spirit descended on them. Then they changed completely. But before then, it was back and forth. And this is like us all. We go back and forth a lot. And we go to this state a lot. Like I'm going fishing. In fact, I could be fishing for a long time in my life. I could actually go fishing and relax for a long time and just yeah, in a way give up. So they said to him, we are going with you also. And you can see, of course, that this is influential. You know, when someone relaxes, he can actually lead other people to relax as well. And this is exactly what happened. St. Peter relaxed and everybody followed. They went out and immediately got into the boat. And it says they went out and immediately tells us what? That this was something they wanted to do. They were excited about doing. It's just to go back to their old days. And notice here, I'm going fishing, you know, means all this. Like, yeah, if you read behind this words, it means that, you know, I want to relax. I want to do what makes me happy. I want to do the things that make me feel home. I want to do the things that I'm used to do. I want to go back to my comfort zone. This is it. Yeah, this phrase means all that. I want to be comfortable. I want to be in my comfort zone. They went out and immediately got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. One of the things here is that when I go after my own desire, what is the result of this? That I catch nothing. So if I go after my own will and not the will of God, I will not catch anything. And this is very, very important. But when the morning had now come, of course, everything in St. John's Gospel has a meaning behind it too. When the morning had come, the morning here is the new day, you know, the light. If you take it in a spiritual way, and they were in darkness and then now there is light. But when the morning had now come, Jesus stood on the shore. Jesus stood on the shore. So Jesus did not come in the boat like he did the first time. The first time was like when he called them to the service. Yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. And again, just like the disciples of Emmaus, Jesus is right there, but they did not recognize him. So Jesus stood on the shore. They also say that this story has a lot of mystical or some reference to the second coming. After the second coming is that Jesus is standing at the shore waiting for the ship of the church, the boat, which is the church, to come. Yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Then Jesus said to them, "Children, have you any food?" Notice that when they were going out to fish, one of the reasons why is to have food, is to get food. So Jesus told them, "Children, have you any food? Did you get any food by following your ways?" And they answered him, "No." So this is also a question for all of us. You know, sometimes we do things our own way because we feel this is the right thing to do, and this we feel that this will give us some satisfaction. But then when Jesus asks us, "Have you anything?" we say we didn't really catch anything. We didn't really get any food. This also reminds us of the first calling. The first calling of the disciples was that Jesus told them, "From now you will be fishermen of men instead of fishermen of fish. You will be fishermen of men." But they went back to being fishermen of fish, and they did not catch anything. Also, Jesus told them, when you go out to preach, you don't have to worry about carrying like any food or taking money with you, and I will provide for you. And here Jesus is telling them, you know, you went by yourselves and you didn't get any food, but now I will again provide for you. So they answered him, "No." And he said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. And this reminds us of the first story of the calling of St. Peter and St. John and St. James and Andrew, actually, because they were all fishermen, and the same thing happened with them. Almost the same thing. We will see that there are some differences in the story. But he said, cast the net on the right side of the boat. And, again, and this is very similar in a way that the first story was at night and they didn't catch anything. The second story was also at night and they didn't catch anything. And then Jesus orders them to cast the net. And in both times, they actually obeyed. But in this time, he told them, cast the net on the right side of the boat. What does that mean? Why did he tell them the right side? Because he's telling them, go, you went your way and you didn't catch anything. I want you to go my way now. I want you to go the right way, on the right side. Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast, and now they were not able to draw it in because of the multitude of fish. Also, this reminds us of the first story. The same thing, that they cast, like obeying Jesus' commandment, and they catch so many fish they can't even draw it. Therefore, that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. And this part is very, very beautiful. There were 7 disciples, and out of those 7 disciples, like maybe at least 3 that we know were fishermen and were in the first story as well. They saw what happened before, and Peter saw it, James saw it, and John saw it. But the only one who recognized Jesus right away was John. Why? And notice here, when in verse 2, when he talked about himself, he referred to himself as the son of Zebedee, because he was embarrassed of what he did. So he wanted to, confess that I was one of the people who went fishing. But then when he talked about himself here, therefore that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. He referred to himself as the one whom Jesus loved. The phrase that he loved to say, or to refer to himself as, the one whom Jesus loved. But why did he say that here? What's the connection between his love relationship with God and recognizing God? And that answers our question. The only one who can recognize God is the one who loves him, is the one that has a relationship with him. Things can happen in our lives and we learn from it. And then when it happens again, if I truly have a relationship with God, I will recognize that this is the hand of God, because he did that to me before and I paid attention to it. But the one who doesn't pay attention to how God deals with him will not recognize him. But if I pay attention to how God is dealing with me, I will recognize his hand. I will recognize his voice. I will recognize his actions, or his, like, whatever he does with me. So once John saw that, they cast the net and it was too heavy because they couldn't draw it up because of the multitude of fish, he right away said to Peter, it is the Lord. No one else can do this. I know that this is Jesus. Notice that because John loved Jesus and he felt that Jesus loved him, he always was the first one to recognize him. If you remember in the last chapter, when him and Peter ran to the tomb, John believed first. It says that he took a look inside and he believed. Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he had removed it, and plunged into the sea. You know that fishermen, most of the time when they go fishing, they don't have clothes on. It makes their job easier. But Peter here did something that's opposite to logic. When you're about to jump in the water, you actually take your clothes off. But he had his clothes off, and because he was he wanted to meet Jesus, he actually put his clothes on. But notice here that, Peter is the same like Peter that we know, the one who is always like very quick to act, and like he doesn't think about what he's doing much. But this also tells us how much Peter loved Jesus. Because if someone loves, he doesn't think much. But if he didn't love Jesus, he could have thought about, how can I swim? I can just stay in the boat and, I'll be there in a couple of minutes. Or what if, there is something in the water? What if the water is too cold? He could have thought about many things, but he didn't. It says that when Peter heard that it was the Lord, that's all he needed. He put on his outer garment, for he had removed it, and plunged into the sea. Why did he do that? Because he wanted to see Jesus before the others. He couldn't wait. He said, instead of waiting, for the boat to arrive to the other side where Jesus is, I'm just gonna plunge in the water and swim. But the other disciples came in the little boat, for they were not far from land, but about 200 cubits. And 200 cubits, they say, is about 100 meters, 96 or 100 meters. So it wasn't really too far, dragging the net with fish. And notice here that they were dragging the net because the net was heavy. And this gives us an idea that they were struggling with it. It was burdensome to drag. Then, as soon as they had come to land, they saw a fire of coals there, and fish laid on it, and bread. So, the nice meaning here is that they went out to catch fish and to bring food. Maybe because they were hungry, maybe they wanted money, whatever. We said could be different reasons. But of course, part of that reason is to get food. And they couldn't get food by themselves. But they went out and found what? They found that Jesus had prepared for them a very nice meal. The fish was there, the bread was there, and it was hot and ready. So what does that tell us? It tells us something important. That Jesus is the one that provides. And he provides for all of us much better than what we provide for ourselves. So if I rely on him, I am actually much better off than relying on my own resources. And that's why he told them, when you go to visit a city, don't worry about taking food, don't worry about taking money, I will provide for you. So they saw the fire of coals, they saw the fish and the bread. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish which you have just caught. And he told them to bring some of the fish. Of course, he told them, bring the fish that you just caught. But who really gave them that fish? He himself. Because they, overnight, they couldn't catch anything. But he's the one that gave them, that put those fish inside the net for them. Simon Peter went up and dragged the net to land, full of large fish. Now, the fathers say that this actually is, kind of this story is symbolic of the second coming, that the church is going to present the fish to God. The fish here is the men, is the people who believed. And the disciples are the leaders of the church. And they bring the ship with all the fish in it, and they bring everything to God. And God is waiting on the shore. But here, notice that it was full of large fish. In the story of the calling of Peter, they didn't mention that it was large fish. It could be fish of any kind. We don't know. And also in that story, notice that they said that the nets were like about to be torn. meaning that in the world, the ship of the church, while it's still here on earth, it's struggling. But at the end, it will not struggle. The net will not be torn. And the net will be full of large fish. The ones who make it to the end are the good ones, not the good and the bad. 153. And 153 is first a big number, gives us an idea of like that there's a lot of people that will be going to heaven. The church will bring a lot of people to heaven, but also have like so many different meanings about the number itself. But it's what concerns us here is that it means that it's going to be carrying fish from all over, like God said, from every nation, from every tribe, from every tongue. And although there were so many, the net was not broken. Although there were so many, the net was not broken. Different from the story, like we said in the Gospels, about the calling of St. Peter when the net was about to break. Jesus said to them, "Come and eat breakfast." Yet none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" knowing that it was the Lord. And Jesus very calmly and, with his like nice voice, he told them, "Come and eat breakfast. Come and eat. I'm the one who provides for you." Yet none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" knowing that it was the Lord. It wasn't anymore, they didn't doubt it anymore that this is Jesus, this is God. And that's why they couldn't ask, or they didn't ask. Jesus then came and took the bread and gave it to them, and likewise the fish. This is now the third time Jesus showed himself to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. Of course, we read about different appearances in different Gospels. This was the third time in the Gospel of St. John. This was the third story in the Gospel of St. John. But there are so many other appearances that we hear about in other Gospels, and there are appearances that we didn't hear about. Because he said that, the Gospel says that he used to appear to them for 40 days. We don't have like all of them documented. Like when he said, for example, that he appeared to 500 at the same time. But we know that he used to appear to them on different occasions. So there is a couple of things that in these last two verses that we're going to talk about, but I leave them for next time because we want to make a comparison between the appearance of Jesus in the first, the first time to the disciples when he called St. Peter and John and James, and this one, and we'll see the difference between the journey of the church on earth and then reaching the shore at the end. So we'll leave it here and then continue, God willing, next time. Then we will also talk about the other part of chapter 21, which is about St. Peter and St. John. And glory be to God forever. Amen. If anybody has any